Really good to have you all here. We got some breaking news. Kamala Harris allegedly trying to change the debate rules. Wait a second. Haven't we seen this one before? Yeah, we have. It's all coming as Donald Trump lashes out big time at ABC and the guy who's supposed to be moderating the whole thing. Wow. Wait till you hear this. And Trump is revealing a brand new plan designed to jumpstart growth in this economy. I'm going to share with you some details from what he was saying there at the Economic Club of New York. CNN is being forced to admit that, you know what? Kamala Harris might have a little bit of a klepto problem going on. Kleptomaniac, shall we say. I mean, when it comes to policies, whether it be tax on tips, whether it come to that border wall, and the biggie, is Joe Biden going to pardon his son? What do we think? What do you guys say? What do you think? I'm just curious, looking in some of your comments here. Yes, no, maybe. It is good to have you here. Welcome to the program. Do me the favor of making sure that you subscribe to the show. Subscribe, hit the bell. This way, every day, you know when I am right here live with you. Do me that favor. You see the subscribe right there? There we go. Anyway, we got a lot to get to today. This is pretty fascinating stuff because Donald Trump is almost sort of preemptively working ahead of what we're going to have coming down the pike on Tuesday night. In other words, he's lashing out at ABC, a company that he's actually suing, by the way, because of what he would say is libel for their coverage of some of those legal challenges that he ran into. So he specifically is suing ABC News, parent company is Disney, don't forget, and he is suing George Stephanopolis, who's the guy who's going to be anchoring the whole shindig. He went on Hannity's program last night on Fox, obviously a very receptive audience there, and he took a few pot shots, shall we say.
They are the most dishonest network, the meanest, the nastiest, but that was what I was presented with. I was presented with ABC, George Stephanopolis, you know who he is. And he's a nasty guy. And yet, he's a nasty guy. I've had him up to here. But let me tell you, he's a very, very bad kind of a guy. But I watched his interview of Joe Biden. It was like the softest interview I've ever seen. It was softer than the CNN interview of Kamala.
Interesting. So he feels, I think, pretty strongly that there's a bias there. Now, let's be real, shall we? George Stephanopoulos worked for Clinton. He was the press person, the flack, the spokesperson for the Clinton White House. So clearly, he's got a bias, shall we say. I mean, he made his living working for the Democrat Party until he got a gig at Disney, ABC. So one can expect a certain, but look, it's par for the course, right? I mean, this is all that happens, right? You have a certain amount of bias in the media, and I think Donald Trump is finally calling it all out, calling it out to their faces. Now some will say, oh, maybe you shouldn't have done that. He was playing to his audience, right? That was his crowd. He knew he had a live audience, and they loved it. He said, Sean, ABC, they're the worst. They're the worst. And yeah, next time you'll moderate it. Like Kamala would ever let that happen. Think about it. Fox has been trying to get a debate. Forget about it, shall we say. Forget about it. I don't think that's going to happen. Anyway, in the meantime, you get some back channeling going on where the Kamala campaign, they had been trying, to change all the rules. For example, she wanted to have her notes ahead of the debate right in front of her. Trump didn't like the idea of that, especially given that they had already agreed to a whole set of rules. Mind you, back when Biden was at the top of the Democrat ticket, before Kamala was installed. So they had a set of rules. She wasn't supposed to bring her notes, right? You were just supposed to be there with a pad and paper and some water. And you were supposed to be standing. Well, Kamala didn't want to stand. And I have every reason to believe it's a little bit like, unless it was George Stephanopoulos. Well, it is. What am I saying? George probably doesn't want to stand either. George. Kamala. So Donald Trump is going to be the elephant in the room, like literally, like the biggest, tallest person on stage. So she didn't like that idea. She tried to make sure that it was a sitting interview. That didn't happen. I mean, I don't know. What's next? Is she going to take away the water? No water? She doesn't want the mics open. She feels that America would be better served. Forgive me, she does want the mics open. She feels that America would be better served if the microphones were open. And this is what we're hearing from her campaign over and over again on the cable airwaves, leading some to think that, she's still trying to back channel something here, maybe try and goad Donald Trump into saying, sure, what the heck, why not? Open those microphones. His campaign doesn't want those microphones open because they feel that it's a more disciplined environment, and clearly that worked to his advantage, shall we say, last time around with none other than Biden, who couldn't string a sentence together for 2 minutes. I think Kamala might be sort of the same deal here, because without Trump interrupting her, you may just get a lot of word salad, this kind of stuff.
I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been. What can be unburdened by what has been.
Oh dear, I'm just waiting for the, Anyway, I'm going to play for you in just a moment what the Kamala camp is out there saying. But first, a quick word from one of our great sponsors here on the Trish Regan Show, none other than American Heart for Gold. Go to trishlovesgold.com. Trish loves gold. I do. You know that. Anyway, I do believe it's a big part of a diversified portfolio, or a part, I should say. How big? That's really up to you, because you are your best gauge, I think, for risk. You can text my name, Trish, to 65532. Text Trish to 65532. American Heart for Gold, trishlovesgold.com. They have a special offer for those of you that are looking to purchase gold. You can get up to $15,000 in free silver. So that's a pretty big deal. If you text Trish, Trish, to 65532, you can call them at 1-844-495-1115. Obviously, I am very, very concerned about all the money printing. I have been since I began this show. And sure enough, what has happened? Gold has gone up. Look, if you continue to print money in society, and I don't see any other way around it, frankly. I mean, Trump's talking about an efficiency bureau with Elon Musk. That might help. But look, you've got a lot of waste in this government. You have a lot due by way of interest. So that interest on the debt is going to continue to be very costly, therefore driving the value of your US dollar down. And as a result, you want to have some kind of diversification tool in your portfolio. Just text Trish to 65532. Anyway, you've got a situation where dare I say, surrogates for the campaigns, those are the reporters, that are supposed to be out on the reporting trail. They're talking about how really, the campaigns feel that it would be so much better. Kamala Harris feels it would be so much better if those microphones were open. And this is what one NBC reporter was saying on the MSNBC airwaves today. Take a listen.
Well, what we will see on Tuesday night is 90 minutes where the two candidates, former President Trump, current Vice President Kamala Harris, they'll be meeting for the very first time face-to-face. And there will be no notes, no props, and there'll be a back and forth. And the microphones are scheduled to be off when one party is not speaking. So the focus would remain on the candidate who is directed a question. And if there is back and forth, the Harris campaign has been trying to at least get the network that's providing the debate to consider opening up mics if there's a lot of over-talk. They're also expecting to have a part of the pool that travels with the candidates be in the room, in the studio space that they're creating in Philadelphia, to be able to observe as journalists if there is talking that happens that is not directly on the television signal because of the microphone situation. So we'll see how all of that unfolds. Of course, as you pointed out, these were rules that were originally agreed to when Joe Biden was intending to run and were used during the first debate from June 27th. And so to some degree, the Trump campaign, in just the simple art of negotiation, doesn't like to give up something it already had, while the Harris campaign really viewed this as a new opportunity with a new candidate to try to set up a dialogue and an interchange.
No, not a dialogue. Just this new set of rules that would be advantageous to her, that wouldn't showcase how short she is in stature, that wouldn't showcase how she doesn't know all these numbers and statistics and information off the top of her head because she wants to use the notes, and that wouldn't showcase her word salad. They were hoping Donald Trump would just interrupt. Well, here's the deal, guys. The rules are the rules. Dare I say, the rules are the rules. I mean, I know, I get it. for the left. They feel that they can change them mid-game. I mean, obviously they changed their candidate, for goodness sakes. I mean, if they're willing to change their candidate, think of what they're willing to change. And yet it doesn't matter. You saw the latest Rasmussen poll. Trump there, 53% versus Harris at 47%. This is amazing. I reported on this yesterday for you guys because I think it's really important to take a look at these numbers and these graphs, right? I'm a financial person. I like charts. When you look at this Rasmussen reports graphic, I think it says a whole lot to you because you see that crossover. He is darting ahead. In other words, when you talk momentum, the momentum right now is with Donald Trump. Amazingly, they're seeing something like 53 to 37. That's incredible, right? Well, forgive me, that was actually back in July. And then if you go down, you see August. There was a sense that there was no way in HELL that Harris would ever be able to pull off a win. And then as soon as she was announced, what do you know? Oh, everybody loved her. And now they don't really love her so much anymore. So much so that it looks like Trump 53, Harris 47. This is Rasmussen. The other thing I want to show you is Nate Silver's prediction models in which, he keeps climbing ahead here. This is really fascinating to me. 56.7% there in the Nate Silver prediction model. And I think that's really relevant here. I mean, take a look. Wow. Those are pretty stunning numbers. And this is not something at all that anybody would have been talking about or even thought about just a few weeks ago. So a massive sort of shift. Momentum is with him. So in this scenario, it becomes sort of his to lose effectively. And that's why there is so much riding on this debate. It is why Kamala Harris is doubling down, trying to prep, trying to do what she can to be able to confront the reality that is, frankly, just in my estimation, and you know how I feel on this, just better policy. Frankly, just better policy. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, hit the bell, all that good stuff. Policy matters, right? And we don't have enough of it. There isn't enough talk about policy. It's one of the reasons why I'd love for you to go and check out my friends at Project 25. You can get the truth about Project 25 if you go to 25truth.org, and they have a whole sort of, it's not in the shadows. They try and pretend, okay, this whole thing is in the shadows. It's the Heritage Foundation. Oh my goodness. And the reality is this: they're talking about things that are so critical to our foundation as a society. The left is always trying to paint the right as somehow diabolical. Few other words that I won't use. And, when you look at this and you think that, oh, it's some hidden agenda. No, it's not hidden. It's right out there for everybody to see. And it's actually really good stuff. Like, let's make sure that we're educating as many people as we possibly can to really protect this meritocracy, the system that is the American dream. Or, for example, to really utilize all the energy we have. I mean, why wouldn't you, right? Green, fossil fuels, everything. Let's be energy independent in every sense of the word. So go check it out. I do encourage you to do that. I'll leave the link in the notes as well for the show, 25truth.org. Anyway, you get a situation now where he's climbing in the polls, climbing, and the left is now freaking out because she doesn't have anything. I mean, Donald Trump today in New York City at the Economic Club of New York, announcing his big economic plan, which includes a lot of really interesting stuff, sort of basic stuff that I think would be very, very appealing in places like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, because it includes manufacturing in a way that wouldn't devastate millions of jobs. Listen to him here.
We will ensure that the United States has a giant steel industry, an aluminum industry, a manufacturing base, and a defense base. We want a industrial base that can take care of our defense needs 100%. And you can call it what you want. Some might say it's economic nationalism. I call it common sense. I call it America first. This is the policy that built this country, and this is the policy that will save our country.
His economic policy is good. It always was, all right? It just was. It was smarter. It was edgier. He understood how to use trade and tariffs in ways that we had not seen from previous politicians. Maybe they understood it, maybe they didn't. Maybe they actually had other people pulling the strings that had no interest in the kinds of policies that might be bad for their particular businesses or their particular families. Dare I say, hey, we're going to get to Hunter Biden coming up because he's got some insane legal strategy that we must discuss. We must. But the reality is Donald Trump talked about things that actually resulted in a prosperous economy. In fact, when you look at median incomes during his time in office, you actually see that they were the best they've been since, well, you got to go all the way back to JFK in the 1950s. So we were actually starting to see some success for the middle class. We were seeing steady GDP growth. We had a stock market that was growing. We had an overall economy that was growing. I mean, you can kind of look at that March 2020 environment and the shutdown that resulted from that as a bit of a wash, right? Because everything tanked and the economy was down 30 some odd percent, only to then be up 30 some odd percent as soon as that was over. And so he handed Joe and Kamala a pretty successful portfolio, right? Like to use a market phrase. There it was, a pretty successful portfolio. And what did they do? They ruined it. They took inflation from 1.7% all the way up to upwards of 9%. It was actually pretty darn stunning to see. And you know what? He knows it. Kamala knows it. These are the numbers that were just put out by the Trump campaign. Take a look, guys. 2.77%. That was the mortgage rate back when Trump was there. Now you're looking at 7.75%. Personal savings, now this number's a little tweaked, right? Because there was all the stimmy money that everybody had, which I was actually really concerned about, rightly so. Rightly so. Why? Because what's it going to do? It's going to lead to inflation eventually. Well, Kamala and Biden, they didn't care about that. In fact, as soon as they got into office, they had to have their stimmy too, right? And not only did they have the stimmy checks, but they then put forward the biggest stimulus package we've ever seen, and they called it the Inflation Reduction Act. And what did it do? It caused inflation to jump like that. Gasoline now 51% higher, eggs 47% higher, car insurance 54% higher. I mean, how do people do it, right? Because wages, let's go back to that other chart for a second. Wages, real wages are down nearly 4% when they were up 8.2% under Donald Trump. So his policy, it actually worked. It actually worked. And people say, oh, he's protectionist and all these tariffs are going to lead to additional inflation problems. And there's actually a school of economic thought that actually says it's possible in the very, very sort of initial stage, but long term, it actually reduces inflation. And this is the theory that he's really sticking to. Again, let's go back to Donald Trump today, moments ago, at the Economic Club of New York.
Smart tariffs will not create inflation. They will combat inflation. I had almost no inflation, and I had the highest tariffs that anyone's seen, and they were going a lot higher. Foreign nations will pay us hundreds of billions of dollars, reducing the deficit and driving inflation down. It will largely reduce our deficit. In my first term, we imposed historic tariffs with no effect on consumer prices or inflation. The anti-tariff people, many of them, I believe, honestly work for these other countries in some form, get tremendous amounts of lobbying money and other money because it doesn't make sense what they're saying. But we had no inflation, and we had protection, and I saved so many industries. I saved the steel industry. But Biden and Harris are letting it go. They're letting it go. It's so easy to keep. A combination of fair trade, tax cuts, regulatory cuts, and energy abundance will allow us to produce more goods better and cheaper right here in the USA than we've ever done before.
Wow. So, again, a pretty detailed plan there. Pretty serious, straightforward. You saw it. And look, I think bottom line, the proof is in the pudding, right? People are like, wait a second, the last 3 years have been quite miserable. Just look at the economic misery index, right? They'd be quite miserable for people. And they compare and contrast to what was. And I think there's some nostalgia there. As far as inflation goes, I totally agree with that. It's one of the reasons why I do say you've got to be diversified. Part of the diversification should include some allocation to gold. And when you take a look at gold, I recommend you call my friends over at American Hartford Gold. TrishLovesGold.com is the URL. You can get up to $15,000 right now in free silver when you buy gold from them. If you text Trish, my name Trish, to 65532, 1-844-495-1115. Give them a call. They'll happily talk you through it. And again, use my name so that you can get that $15,000 worth of free silver. Up to, I should say, because I think it depends on how much gold you're actually buying. Anyway, look, inflation is here to stay. Donald Trump has a plan to combat it in some way, shape, or form, and it includes things like tariffs, which is pretty interesting. One of the things that I liked about him, and I thought he did really well, was he was able to affect trade and trade deals with the use of tariffs, with the use of sort of economic policy that could result in a better national security policy. Like, for example, remember when he said to Mexico, hey, Mexico, you're going to pay for this wall. You're going to pay for this wall. Or guess what? We're not going to allow our American companies to be locating their car factories or any other factories there in Mexico. So you're going to lose all that money. You're going to lose all those jobs. And you know what? All of a sudden, Mexico started paying attention. So it's, again, the use of the power that we have as the hegemonic power of the world, as the world's number one economy, and saying, okay, well, you know what? We got some power. Let's use it. Look at the negotiation just on the debate issue that we started with. The fact that Kamala tried to change the rules in the middle of the game, and he's like, yeah, no way, Jose, that's not happening. And now she has to, eat crow, so to speak. She tried and she utterly failed. So if she can't negotiate with ABC News and Donald Trump, how the heck is she going to negotiate with China? Right? It's actually a real concern, I do believe. Speaking of inflation, she so doesn't get it that she actually keeps going back to the well, and somehow, and this is what you hear from the Democrat Party, they want to keep blaming Donald Trump for all of it. Here she is with Dana Bash in the CNN interview.
You have been vice president for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
The steps that you're talking about now, why haven't you done them already?
Well, first of all, we had to recover as an economy, and we have done that. I'm very proud of the work that we have done that has brought inflation down to less than 3%.
I know I say this a lot, but it's important for you to remember. It's not like inflation is coming down. It's still up 2.9% on the heels of all the increases we've been dealing with for the last 3.5 years. So, that month when it was up 9-point-something%, and then they were all excited because it's down at, 7-point-something%, and then it comes down to 6-point-something%. It's like, no, guys. This is like just getting stacked on top of each other, one after another. It's one of the reasons why when I created my financial research company, where we're looking at sort of the biggest macro issues affecting markets, and we're looking at how it affects one's investing, one of the most important things to me was actually having some names of companies that you could hold for the long haul and not have to worry about just exactly how bad inflation was going to get. I think it's really important to consider these macroeconomic effects when you're investing. I also think it's incredibly important to be investing. It's why I tell people, look, it's the one thing you can sort of control. Now, you can't control if markets go up or markets go down, but you can make sure that you're saving for your future. And so it's so important to me. I've been so thrilled to start this venture, and I'm so proud to bring it to all of you guys because you know what? You deserve it. And there's not enough information for everyday investors out there, good information, valuable unconflicted information, shall we say, independent research that really gives you an honest view of what's going on. And so that was my goal with 76 Research. We have achieved that. We have had, just a wonderful time doing it. So many of you have signed up. You can do that for just $1 a month, by the way. It's like nothing for the first 2 months, and then it goes to $9.95. But go to 76report.com or 76research.com, sign up, get that dollar deal. All you have to do is type in code word dollar, DOLLAR, and it's $1 a month, right? If nothing else, you get a lot of really important information to understand right about now. If we take a look at, for example, I'm going to go to the Income Builder portfolio at 76research.com. These are the top 5 holdings in the Income Builder portfolio. We do have 3 portfolios for you guys. There's an Income Builder, there's an Inflation Protection, and there's an American Resilience portfolio, which is a little more growth oriented, ex-NVIDIA, because, NVIDIA is sort of one of the wild ones, shall we say. Anyway, if you take a look at this, it's actually for the 3 months ending 8/29/24. It's up 15% versus the S&P 6%. So some good stuff there. Look, it's really important to me to be able to democratize a little bit of the investing environment. I started my career on Wall Street. I worked in financial news for the last couple of decades. My friend Rob Horton, brilliant stock picker, was managing billions of dollars on Wall Street, and I convinced him that this is really, I think, an innovative way to think about the future, to be able to bring investing ideas to more people, right? In an economical way that's a little bit more about volume as opposed to, expense. So I'll leave it at that, but I encourage you guys, definitely take a look at 76research.com. Elon Musk could get a job in the White House if Donald Trump is elected. Today, Donald Trump revealed that Elon and he might be coming up with some kind of efficiency task force. Yeah, that's exactly what they're talking about. I mean, there's a lot of graft, right? Lots of dead weight in the government, shall we say? Well, Elon thinks he can help clean some of that up, and Donald Trump seems interested. Listen to him here at the Economic Club of New York.
Fourth, at the suggestion of Elon Musk, who has given me his complete and total endorsement. That's nice, 'cause he's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. It's very, very much appreciated. I will create a government efficiency commission tasked with conducting a complete financial and performance audit of the entire federal government and making recommendations for drastic reforms. We need to do it. Can't go on the way we are now. And Elon, because he's not very busy, has agreed to head that task force. Be interesting. If he has the time, that'll be a good one to do it. But he's agreed to do it. In 2022, fraud and improper payments alone cost taxpayers an estimated hundreds of billions of dollars. As the first order of business, this commission will develop an action plan to totally eliminate fraud and improper payments within 6 months. This will save trillions of dollars, trillions. It's massive. For the same service that you have right now, trillions of dollars is wasted and gone, and nobody knows where it went. Further taming inflation and bringing prices way down.
So I think this is kind of interesting, because if you compare and contrast it, say, with the Biden-Harris plan, which is, let's go after all those people that have $600 in their checking account because they might be avoiding the IRS and taxes. Remember that one? They literally, this was the most asinine thing. I mean, one of them, because there's a lot to pick from. Let's be honest. But one of the strangest things that they came up with was that they were going to somehow find all their nickels and dimes in people's accounts that had as many as $600 worth of transactions in a given year. They wanted the IRS to have access to the bank accounts. I mean, can you believe it? And he's actually spinning it around, and he's like, no, we actually have to go after government waste, because it's the government that is needlessly spending your hard-earned money. I mean, I'm not in any way advocating anything, other than, you pay your taxes, believe me, but it's a fascinating way to think about it, because instead of saying, okay, I'm going to go after those little people somehow they thought they were going to get billionaires, because every billionaire has $600 worth of transactions in their accounts. He's saying, no, you know what? I'm going after the government itself. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this scares the living daylights out of people. It really does. And so already, if you go on MSNBC, you see, Elon this, Elon that, Elon's going to be, so it's first of all, big bad Trump. Now it's big bad Elon. And they're frightened. They're frightened of change. The system has worked so well, apparently. Yeah, I say that with some irony over the last however many years. And we've racked up $35 trillion worth of debt and have no plan to actually fix it. Now he's talking about saying, I want an efficiency council to go in there and get rid of the government waste. And that scares them. It really, really scares them. We got the jobs report coming out this week. Actually, tomorrow we'll see how that's all doing. But I think everyday Americans know, the economy is just not in a really good spot, not compared to where it was. And people say, look at the stock market. And sure, the stock market's been up, the stock market's been great. But I've told you before, it's why I want you to invest. I've told you before, the reason you need to be part of the action and you need to be part of the stock market is because the game is sort of rigged. It's rigged against the average middle American. It's there for your people on the bottom that they can give handouts to. Let them eat cake. We'll keep them all happy and, keep on coming in. I'll keep giving you these freebies and maybe you'll vote for me because maybe we can kind of slide you under the radar, dare I say? Or better yet, we'll give you a path to citizenship and you can really, really vote. Just make sure you vote for me, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, or whoever the Democrat du jour is. Yeah. Or you can be at the very top. Where again, you got Kamala on speed dial. You call, you say, hey, this is what I need. And all of a sudden, boom, presto. Well, what happens to everybody in the middle? They're the ones that are shortchanged. And when you get this much inflation and you get no policy ideas that are actually beneficial to the middle class, they go after him, for example, for saying, hey, I'm going to allow corporations to onshore some of their money that they were keeping offshore, in places like Ireland, because you'd only have a 12% tax there. That was a smart thing to do. That was a really smart thing to do. Because guess what? When that money comes back to work in the United States and it goes to build facilities and create jobs, that's stimulative to the economy. If you leave it over there in Ireland, and believe me, I love Ireland. I was just over there for nearly 3 weeks. I love it. I'm from there. I have family there. But you know what? It's working for them. How's it going to work for us? So I think we need people that are really thinking articulately about this instead of penalizing the system and saying, oh, no, you big bad companies, how dare you? I'm Janet Yellen and I'm going to put in a worldwide tax. That's her answer. And I'm Janet Yellen and I'm going to go after all those billionaires that have $600 in their checking account. I'm going to make sure the IRS is in there because we need to make sure that people, of course, everybody needs to make sure they're paying their taxes. But you really think the answer to finding more money is to do that? It's not. It's just not. And so this efficiency council, I think, is really interesting, but super duper scary. Kamala Harris is going to have a tough debate. CNN, actually, they hated to have to do this, I'm sure, but they're caught admitting that, Kamala Harris, she kind of likes to poach some ideas that are Donald Trump's ideas. First there was the no tax on tips, right? And she said she'll do the same thing. Now there's this one. Turns out, who knew? She's like kind of into the wall thing. Yeah. So keep in mind what she used to say, all the tweets she used to put out. She called it a vanity project, this, that, and the other. Well, she's saying something a little bit different right now, and CNN caught on. I want to share it with you.
And statements going all the way back to 2017. And what they found was more than 50 instances of Harris slamming Trump's border wall. But now, new Harris campaign ads actually showcase that very wall.
They do. They do. And so they showed the ad and, basically you see, and I'm going to show some of it to you, you see the Trump wall and she's bragging about how tough she is on border issues and she's going to go after those criminals, et cetera, et cetera. Let's go to the CNN reporter that did the story.
On more than 50 of those tweets criticizing the border wall before she used that in her ad. And I want people to take a look at just a few of what she said here. She called it wasteful, useless, a waste of taxpayer money. a vanity wall project, a wasteful border wall, a stupid wall, a medieval vanity project, and an unnecessary wall. And those are really just, I mean, there were more of this, just like 10 or like 50. But there was really a lot of this was the common refrain during the campaign. You read that quote where she said it was against everything that not only she stood for, everything America stood for, but and she brought this up a lot. Take a listen to just one instance of that in 2019.
It's the president's vanity project.
His multi-billion-dollar vanity project called a wall is nothing more than a distraction from the fact that he actually hasn't focused on working people in America. He contrived a national crisis around his big distraction.
All right, so you go through all of that, you've got all the tweets, and yet all of a sudden in the ads, there's pictures of the wall, and then you went through to look at that wall. Yeah. Like, what is that specific wall that's in her campaign ads now? And you found something very interesting about this specific portion of the wall.
And I think what's also really remarkable about this is, like, I mean, you heard her talking about it there, Trump's wall in his campaign during his presidency. There was really no greater symbol of Trump's presidency than the wall in the way that Democrats were attacking him over the wall and his restrictive immigration policies. So we looked in that ad, and if you look at it, that exact area of wall is in Sasabe, Arizona, and that is a portion of wall that was actually built by Donald Trump. It was built in an area where there was not previous wall. It was actually pretty controversial when they were building it at the time. So just to see that, and then there are other.
She's using his wall that he built to say, "Look at what I did."
And the other images of the wall, we weren't able to pinpoint, but there's telltale signs that was a Trump wall because there's an anti-climbing plate on top that became popularized during the Trump.
So what exactly is going on? Why does she keep stealing all his ideas? Maybe she's realizing that those ideas actually resonate. She was the border czar, for goodness sakes. Remember, the border czar that wouldn't go to the border, for goodness sakes. No, she wouldn't. She couldn't be bothered somehow. She was going to go, however, address the root causes of immigration and the challenges that they're having economically, et cetera, in all of Latin America. Listen, lady, like, unless you want to just incorporate, right, and say, okay, everybody in Latin America, South America, you're going to pay taxes too, and we're going to figure this out all together because we're in charge of North America. Hey, Canada, maybe you should join in. Unless you actually wanted to take that on, I don't think it's our responsibility. I don't think it's our responsibility as a nation to say, okay, we're going to fix all of Latin and South America so that hopefully people will stay there. I think, the most immediate crisis would be to say, okay, you can't come here. And look, this is not mean. I think Americans are incredibly altruistic, incredibly charitable, incredibly kind. It's not mean. It's just, frankly, realism. Because you have economic strains that are forced upon various communities when they are confronted with this migrant challenge. Look at New York City having to deal with it right now. Gosh, the mayor is like persona non grata. Because he's daring to say, wait a second, I don't think we can afford this. Well, New York can't, just like Texas can't. Arizona can't. Nobody can afford to take on what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden think they ought to be able to take on. And so she's finally coming to this realization because, hey, she needs to win in Arizona. She's trying to win in places like Pennsylvania. And I think this is sort of funny. If you ever watch Fox, I used to work there. There's a show called The Five, and Jesse Waters had a funny spin on it. He's a good guy. I want you to hear it.
So, Jesse, she has to draw distinctions from Joe. That should be easy, right? Just bring a mirror and put it under her nose so you could see it fog up.
That's good. So she has to differentiate herself from Joe Biden. But the more she does that, the more she starts agreeing with Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. So Trump's just going to be like, yeah, Kamala, we agree. So why are you running against me? Why didn't you just tell Joe to do what we talked about right here? Why didn't you just tell him that the last 4 years he was wrong and he didn't listen to you? Mm-hmm. Or you didn't really say anything, did you? You just sat there, didn't you? Yeah, you did. So if she says she's going to differentiate herself on Afghanistan, how? She already bragged that she was the last person in the room. How's she going to differentiate herself with the border? She was the border czar. On the economy, she was the tie-breaking vote. I just don't see the areas where she can say, I was different or I would have done things differently. It's just impossible. Her other strategy is to rattle him. Mm-hmm. Okay. The only time Trump was rattled in the first debate was when Biden said he was a 6 handicap.
Yes.
It just blew Trump's mind. Okay, he's been shot, he's been raided, he's been arrested. Yeah. I don't think you can rattle him at the debate. He'll be fine.
That's a good point, right? I mean, and then it just turned into bedlam. And it's like, wait a second. Okay, what's going on? Jesse's right. Like, that was actually the only thing that really seemed to rattle him. Kamala's going to try. She's going to try and needle him. I think it'll be very, very interesting to watch. I'm actually really looking forward to this. This is different, right, than the Biden-Trump debate where he was sort of like, this was like a train wreck in real time, only because you started to feel for Biden. Did you not? I mean, like, look, you know that I have very big concerns about Biden and Biden policies, and we're going to get to Hunter in just a moment. But, you know, it's like, what are they doing to the poor guy? Why are they doing that to him? If I were advising him, I'd be like, no, you're not going near that debate stage, buddy. No, you're going to stay home and you're going to get some sleep. You're going to have your little milk and cookies and go to bed at 7:00 because you can't handle that. I mean, it's past your bedtime, for one thing, right? That was actually one of the excuses that they came up with. Oh, it's past his bedtime. They didn't quite say bedtime. They said, you know, he's really not used to having to be up and about at that hour of the night. It's like, oh dear, actually cringe. So someone made the decision that they were going to feed him to the lions. And that's what happened because he was his own worst enemy. The question is Kamala also her own worst enemy? And how much will George Stephanopolis and ABC News really push back? Don't forget, the president of ABC News arranged for Kamala to meet her husband, Dougie. I mean, Dougie and Kamala would not be a thing if it weren't for the president of ABC News, who was friends with Kamala and Doug and set them up on a little date together. So Kamala has every reason to love the president of ABC News. And I would bet ABC News and Disney really would like Kamala Harris to win the presidency. Meanwhile, wow, you guys following the Hunter Biden deal or no deal? He's trying to have it both ways, you see. Have your cake and eat it too. I guess it's a Biden thing. It's not playing in Peoria or with the judge or with the other side. So this is innovative. This is new. And kind of unusual. You see, he wanted to basically say via an Alford plea that he was not guilty, but he did understand that there was plenty of evidence against him. Okay, so that's kind of it's something that's used in criminal court, and it's when the person, the defendant, admits, okay, I know you got a lot of evidence. I know this doesn't look good, but you know what? I'm really not guilty. So he wanted to use that plea, and it's all pretty bizarre because this goes back to some of the tax evasion stuff. Remember how that one judge was like, I can't sign this thing. It was about the gun charge, et cetera, and they were coming to a plea deal. And she's like, but wait a second. This would mean that no one can ever go after him in the event it's proven or perhaps discovered or addressed that he was getting money from foreign entities and never registered as a foreign agent. Now, it's problematic, right? Because his dad was in charge of Ukraine policy at a time when he was on the board of Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company. He didn't have any qualifications for that. The only real qualification seemed to be that daddy was running Ukraine policy and therefore had a very big checkbook. So there was a company that was willing to write very big checks to Hunter Biden for so-called protection money. That's literally what they called it in the New York Times and the LA Times. They're like, oh, this is totally normal. Often these emerging market countries will hire family members or will hire celebrities to kind of, have some influence, shall we say, in Washington, D.C. And so they were trying to excuse it. Well, the judge was like, I don't think we can excuse this. And I'm not going to say that nobody can ever go back and ask these questions. And so that's why we find ourselves where we are today. All along, he was like, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. They tore up the deal. Remember, it was quite a spectacle. It happened the summer before last. And I want to show you some sound from Jonathan Turley, who's a really smart law professor in D.C. He was on Fox talking about this, and he kind of laid it out. And he said, you know what? They really messed it up badly.
Of the Alford plea, I would have expected them to get the Alford plea if they had pushed for this months ago. It is granted in cases. It's an exception in the sense that you need higher approval. But I actually think the reason it was turned down here is because of the timing. Every indication is that the defense did not inform the prosecutors that they were going to change their plea. That is really very unusual. It is something that does not go over well with the prosecutions. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I would never have done that because even if I don't get along with the prosecution, I don't want to have this type of jump scare in the middle of a courtroom with the judge watching. And I think that probably poisoned the well for the Alford plea. I think that if months ago, if they had gone back to the table, they probably could have secured the Alford plea as part of a global agreement. They could not have handled this case worse, in my view. I mean, they have put Hunter Biden in the worst possible position. He will get very little benefit from his plea because he has very little to trade at this point. You know, when the plea deal collapsed in the Delaware courtroom, his counsel famously declared, just rip it up, which at the time I said, I got to tell you, very few defense attorneys would have said that instead of going back to the table, try to eke out the best you can get in a really bad case. And instead, they played hardball. They forced both these cases to go to trial, and they did not, according to the Justice Department, engage in serious negotiations for a plea deal. That was in a prior filing by the Justice Department.
Makes you wonder why they were so confident. Well, you know, Daddy's the president. Daddy will handle this. I think Daddy still will. Now, KJP, that rocket scientist of a press person that Biden has there in the White House, was asked about this today. They said, hey, any chance that the president might pardon his son? He's been asked this before, and he says, no. Well, she said, absolutely not. Not on the table. To which I'm like, really? Like, if there was only one thing you could have done when you were negotiating your exit, buddy boy, and Kamala was coming in to take your place, and she stole it big time, right? I mean, I wouldn't be too happy if I were him or Jill. I get it. You know, we all wondered what was really going on with Dr. Jill. But she didn't want her hubby getting replaced by the likes of Kamala Harris. Okay, so as you're negotiating that exit from stage left, wouldn't you think you'd say, hey, I got to do something for Hunter? Like, he's my son? Like, this is one I actually think that Americans could sort of forgive him on. I mean, if he's going to go to jail for 17 years. Biden's like not going to make it around much longer. If there's one time to use your presidency power, shall we say, maybe it actually is to help your son. And you're going to sit there and say, no way. I mean, I'll believe it when I see it. And I think this is you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, right? Because if he does, everyone's, it's corruption, this, that, and the other. I get it. But if he doesn't, what does that tell you about who Joe Biden is or is not as a person, as a father? Like, you wouldn't take that opportunity? Really? I mean, it's sort of, wild. I mean, kids, they learn lessons when they're young, right? And hopefully when they're young, you teach them right from wrong, good from bad, but it's kind of late now. The guy's like 50-something. Man. So that was the big sort of amazing news today. Hunter Biden shocking everyone with this Alford plea, and like the other side's like, yeah, no, not happening. And so now one has to wonder, is he going to jail? Or is Daddy going to save the day? We shall see. What do you think? I'm looking at your comments. Jeb is not a fan of Lady Macbeth, Jill Biden. I get it, okay? You guys are not a fan. You definitely think he's going to I think he will, too. John, is that my friend John? I think it is. It's John on Twitter. Hey, John Carney, nice to see you. John is a really smart economics reporter and I think is over at Breitbart now. We used to work together at Bloomberg or CNBC, one of those places. It's good to see him. Anyway, I think that there's probably a very good chance that he does that. And I think actually Americans would forgive him in this case because it is his son and he's really old and his son is really old too. And I think if he doesn't, that's pretty darn telling. It's really he's so concerned about his own legacy that he's going to kind of stick it to his son. Not that his son doesn't deserve it. Believe me. Mike, good to see you. James, good to see you. Brian, great to have so many people. David, yeah, daddy'll save him. Ian, it's good to see you. Ian Barber, always here during the live. Thank you so much. Guys, remember, take a look at 76research.com. Use code word dollar, DOLLAR, so you get it for just $1 a month for the first 2 months, $9.95 thereafter. If you like looking at stocks and things you can invest in, this is for you, plus the model portfolios. 3 different model portfolios. Again, go to 76 Research. And hey, you know what? If nothing else, I'm going to put it up here. Just get the free stuff, for goodness sakes. I mean, it's there for you for a reason. I put a lot of love into this. So thank you very much for all of your support and all of your enthusiasm. I will see you right back here tomorrow. It's Friday already. We got jobs report coming out. Ooh, that'll be interesting. I wonder what the under-over is on that one, right? Let me know what you think. I think it could be more challenging than Kamala anticipates. But we'll see. I'll see you right here. Back live tomorrow.